Madam President, I want to thank my friend, colleague in both the House and the Senate, Senator Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader, for his kind words. He has been such a valuable ally in this battle. And as leader on the Senate side, Chuck, I just can't thank you enough.
No, thanks go to you. Thanks go to you.
Time and again, we did things here to fight for these young people that were difficult politically. And I just want to thank all the senators on both sides of the aisle who were part of moving this issue forward. They did it at great political risk. I can remember, as sure as I'm standing here, watching one of my Democratic Senate colleagues walk down and vote for the DREAM Act, return to her desk in the corner, put her head down and sob, realizing she probably cost her own reelection with that vote. Over and over again, people stood up for these young people. This morning, minutes ago, the Supreme Court brought a smile and a sigh of relief to more than 700,000 young people in the United States of America. This morning, the Supreme Court ruled that the September 2017 rescission of the DACA program by the Trump administration was to be stricken as arbitrary and capricious. So what does it mean? It means for these 700,000 DACA-protected individuals, they can continue to live, to work, and to study in America without fear of deportation for the moment. DACA, of course, is a program created by President Obama in 2012. It was a program that, frankly, was our answer to the failure to enact the DREAM Act as the law of the land. The president used his executive authority to create the DACA program, and here's what it said, just basically mirroring the standards of the DREAM Act, which I introduced 20 years ago. It basically said if you were brought to America as a child, if you have lived in this country, gone to school, don't have a serious problem with the law, you should have a chance to live here without fear of deportation. Now, the DREAM Act said you should have a chance to become a citizen of the United States, which is, of course, our ultimate goal. But the DACA program opened up eligibility, and almost 800,000 came forward and applied. They had to pay a filing fee of $500 or $600, go through a criminal background check, but for many of these young people, it was a turning point in their lives. At that point, finally, there was a chance they could stay in the country they called home, the United States of America. They seized that opportunity and did remarkable things. They enlisted in our military. They went to schools and colleges to pursue an education. They took up jobs as teachers. They finished medical school. They did things that were unimaginable before DACA. And of course, when the administration changed and a new president came in, there was a real question as to whether he would continue the DACA program. The very first time I ever spoke to President Donald Trump was the day of his inauguration, within an hour or two after he was sworn in at a luncheon. And I said to him then, my first words were, Mr. President, I hope that you're going to help those young people, those dreamers, those protected by DACA. He looked at me and he said, Senator, don't worry, we'll take care of those kids. Well, sadly, that didn't happen. In September of 2017, there was a decision made by this administration to eliminate the DACA program. And at that point, were it not for a court challenge and a protective order by the court, those young people might have been subject to deportation. But many, myself included, believed that the process used by President Trump was flawed, and if challenged, it would fall in court. Well, it took from September 2017 until today, just minutes ago, when the Supreme Court ruled that the administration's approach to eliminating DACA was wrong and would be stricken. I want to say for a moment who these young people are, because many people don't know them. They don't wear badges or uniforms to proclaim that they're DACA protected. But this is who they are. Of the 700,000, 200,000 of them are essential employees. You may see them every day in many, many callings across America as we face this national health emergency. Over 40,000 of them are healthcare workers. So if you're a patient at a clinic or a hospital today fighting COVID-19, and your doctor or nurse just walked in the room with a big smile, it's because the Supreme Court said to that healthcare worker, that healthcare hero, you can stay in America. We need you. But of course, that could change, and I want to raise this issue because it's an important one. The Trump administration can decide that they're going to reinitiate this effort to rescind DACA, try to do it right this time by the Supreme Court standards. That would be a terrible tragedy if they made that decision. Not just for those 700,000, but for their families as well. The front page story on the Chicago Tribune this morning was about just such a family, both husband and wife protected by DACA, both of them working in America, trying to buy a little home in Aurora, Illinois. She works in a cancer clinic. He has a job as well. They have two beautiful little kids. They're both DACA protected. Because of this Supreme Court decision, they have another day in America. They have a sigh of relief this morning. But what about next week? What will the Trump administration do to them next week? I'm calling on the president and those around him. I beg them, give these DACA protectees the rest of this year, until next year at least, before anything is considered. Let's protect them now through the election, and let the next president, whoever it may be, make a decision. And I hope before that happens, we will do our part here in the United States Senate, the second part of what we can and should be doing, calling on the president not to rescind DACA again, not to put these young people and their families through this all over again. But secondly, that we do our job in the Senate. I listened to Senator McConnell earlier talking about bipartisanship, talking about our legislative accomplishments, and he's correct. The lands bill we passed yesterday was historic. I'm glad we did it. The coronavirus relief bills that we passed are historic. I'm certainly glad we did them on a bipartisan basis, and I sincerely hope when it comes to justice and policing, we can do the same, a bipartisan effort to enact good law. But let me add to that list, which unfortunately doesn't include a lot of legislation, something that is now critically important. The House of Representatives months ago passed the Dream and Promise Act, which would take care of the DACA issue once and for all. We could enact that law and say to these young people, now you have your chance to stay and earn your path to citizenship in America. That's what we ought to be saying. Everyone knows that our immigration laws are a mess, hard to explain, impossible to defend. We have a chance to do something about that on a bipartisan basis. And I'm calling on Senator McConnell and all the leaders on his side of the aisle, let's join together and do that. Let's have a hearing in the Senate Judiciary Committee. Let's bring this bill to the floor of the Senate this year so that once and for all we can deal with a problem that we have been looking at for 20 years and approaching in so many different ways. But in the meantime, for today, at least for this weekend, and I hope for long beyond that, we will be celebrating a Supreme Court decision which gives a new lease on life to 700,000 young people who have one goal in mind, to be part of America's future. They were educated in our schools. They stood in those classrooms and pledged allegiance to the same flag that we pledge allegiance to. They have their children, they have their families, they have their hopes and their future, and they're making a good thing of their life in America. Thanks to the Supreme Court, they have some more time, and now it's up to the president and up to us to solve this problem once and for all, to do the right thing for them and for the future of America.